Barry, and today I'll be providing an educational video on the pros and cons of immersion training. I'll be trying to provide an overview of what it is while providing some research that has been completed on the area to hopefully give us a better overview of how it works, if it works, and is it recommended for Barry. And today I'll be providing an educational video on the pros and cons of immersion training. I'll be trying to provide an overview of what it is while providing some research that has been completed on the area to hopefully give us a better overview of how it works, if it works, and is it recommended for
taking a piss. I didn't even do anything.
increasing evidence that mental movement stimulation and movement production share similar neurocognitive and learning processes, which was said by Gentili's paper in 2015. Howson stated that motor imagery is a mental representation of movements that involves motor planning and internal stimulation of motor activity. Given this evidence, the question was brought up of how and could we see neural adaptations just using the brain? And can we imagine yourself training? Is it effective? This is a process which is called imagine training, whereby you don't actually train your muscles, and instead of this you just think about doing resistance training and training your muscles. During imagine training, subjects will stimulate a movement without any motor output. This mental process says that subjects will feel themselves performing a movement in a first-person perspective. A study by Pascal Leon et al. 1995 found that physical training and mental practice of a motor skill resulted in a similar amount of improvement in performance of a similar pattern of adaptation in the primary motor cortex of human participants. This then led on to the question that if it works for a physical performance, can mental practice of a maximal voluntary contraction also alter neural signals for muscle strength? This type of imagine training, if effective, could become a very important factor in sport and more specifically rehabilitation. To see if imagine training works and if it is effective, I will look at some previous research done in the area. So we will look at some main landmark papers to see if they agree and what evidence they bring to the table. Okay, it's a revolutionary paper by Guan Yu and Kelly Cole. During the study, they examined any potential neural mechanisms of strength increases that happen before muscle hypertrophy. In basic terms, they looked at maximal voluntary force production after training program with repetitive maximal isometric muscle contractions compared to a training program that did not involve repetitive activation of muscles. What they've done in this study, where they had 30 subjects were split into 3 groups: a control group, a maximal voluntary contraction group, and an imagine training group. They trained on the 5th finger digit on the left hand, and what they've done is they tried to produce as much force by doing that. The imagine training group would sit there and they'd imagine themselves doing this training. The maximal voluntary contraction group would actually perform this training, and then the control group wouldn't actually do any training at all. They do the 5th finger digit on the left hand because it's something that isn't actually used, a muscle that isn't used, so we should be able to see strength gains better, and they do this during the course of 4 weeks. Is that the imagine training group showed an increase of 22% after 4 weeks, the maximal voluntary contraction group 29.75%, and the control group 3.75%, so we see a massive increase in the imagine training group strength after 4 weeks. Not as much as the maximal voluntary contraction, but still enough to take away the factor of the training effect. A piece of good evidence that we can look at is a paper by Dean Herbert, which was undertaken off the back of the Yu and Cole study to try to replicate the findings and test the hypothesis created in that study that imagine training program does that. The methods of this paper were that they recruited 54 subjects who were split into 3 groups, similarly to the paper before: a control group, a maximal isometric contraction group, and an imagine training group. Instead of the 5th finger abduction, they actually trained the maximum elbow flexion this time. So the imagine training again, they imagine doing the elbow flexion, where the maximum isometric contraction group do complete it and the control group do not do any training. They then compared force between the 3 to see if there was any differences. The study was different to the Yu and Cole study, as although we did see a rise in voluntary isometric muscle strength of the elbow flexor in all three groups. The size of it was different. And the size in the isometric group, the training group, 17.8, as we expect after that amount of training, you're going to see that effect. But in the Imagine training group, we're going to see a 6.5% rise, which is the same as the control group. So as we've seen, there's been no real effect at all here. Is it just a learning effect, So this kind of completely contrasts the evidence we found from the Ewan Cole study. The evidence here to look at, and it links the two previous ones, we'll link it together because it uses the fifth finger abductor muscle on the left hand, which was used in the Ewan Cole study, and it also used the elbow flexion, which was used in the Herbert study. So it links the two together. Can this shed more light on what we're trying to find out? In this study, 30 Whitehound males were assigned to mental training with the left finger, fifth digit abduction or the elbow flexion group. Their strength changes were compared between each other. The mental training lasted for 12 weeks with 5 15-minute training sessions per week. During this, they were instructed to perform mental contractions of the fifth finger abduction, elbow flexion for 5 seconds, followed by 5 seconds rest. They completed this 50 times with the surface EMG of the finger abductor and biceps brachii monitored during this, and also again the control group did not perform any training. For the study, we found that both mental training groups increased their muscle strength significantly. The abductor group on the fifth left digit improved by a big 35%, which is a massive increase. The biggest one we've seen. It kind of backs up the evidence we found by Ewan Cole. Imagine training on this abductor muscle does actually work. And on the elbow flexion group, it's still an improvement of 13.5%, bigger than what we could say is a learning effect. It's not as big though as the Ewan Cole results, but it's still both increases and showing that Imagine training is effective. Seeing some contrasting evidence here from the two studies, the Ewan Cole and the Ranganathan, we've seen that Imagine training is effective in the fifth finger digit. On the other hand, we've seen Herbert et al. And also in the Ranganathan saying that it doesn't work on the elbow flexion, so maybe it works on a muscle that is less frequently used. Which is the reason why, and also because we saw a lot more motivation being provided in the Herbert study, where they gave prizes and also they were shouting a lot louder at the participants to help them go. So you have two contrasting pieces of evidence, but overall, it still begs the question of whether actually. Why and how does Imagine training actually work? Well, one of the reasons we believe this to have happened is because of an increase in neural drive, which donates the magnitude of efferent neural output from the central nervous system active muscle fibers, which was said by Gabriel in 2006. Another thing that was mentioned by Gabriel is that Imagine training contractions have been shown to increase the excitability of the cortical areas in the motor cortex that are involved in movement and motion planning. However, Ewan Cole suggested that instead of the neural changes after the mental training occurred at programming or planning levels of the motor system, was most likely involving non-primary cerebral cortical motor areas, and then via this, the altered program in turn may achieve strength gains via actions of spinal circuitry such as inhibition of ventral cells. This information is further backed up by the work of Butler and Darling in 1990. This is also bolstered by reports that neural activation, presumably associated with motor programming, can occur without activating muscles, which is said by Roland et al. In 1980. The massive role the brain plays in this is further backed up by Ranganathan, who says that a stronger central command could recruit the motor units that were otherwise inactive and untrained state, which would drive the active motor units to a higher intensity, and this would then lead to a greater muscle force. Imagine training, there's a great body of evidence in favour and against it, but for me I personally have to recommend it for injured athletes. As we all know, when injured, muscle becomes inactive and the muscle mass decreases and also the strength decreases. So I think Imagine training could reduce the amount of mass loss and also show some strength gains, but also just small. I still believe normal resistance training to be more effective for athletes. There's a lot of body of evidence proving this to be successful, but you should not underestimate Imagine training, as it is still groundbreaking, could still play a pivotal role in sport and exercise physiology in the future.